Okay, so real talk. I've had 3 cups of coffee and I still can't quite believe I'm about to say this sentence out loud, but here we go. There is a city in northern Iraq that has been hit by drones and missiles more than 470 times since the end of February. 470 times. That's not a typo. That's not me exaggerating for the thumbnail. That's a tracked, reported number, and I'll give you the source in a second. That city is Erbil, capital of Iraqi Kurdistan, and it has quietly become one of the most dangerous places on earth to be wearing a U.S. military uniform, and almost nobody outside the region is talking about it the way they should be. So that's what we're doing today. This is Ryan. Some of you know me as Max Afterburner. I flew the F-15E in combat, flew the F-16 with the Thunderbirds, fly airliners now, and I want to break down exactly what's been happening to American troops and American facilities in Erbil, what jets and air defenses are actually doing to stop it, and separate the stuff that's rock solid confirmed from the stuff that's still rumor mill. Let's set the stage first, because if you're just tuning in, none of this is going to click otherwise. Back on February 28th of this year, the US and Israel launched what got called Operation Epic Fury, a massive coordinated strike campaign against Iran, and that kicked off after joint US-Israeli strikes killed several senior Iranian officials, including, and I want to say this plainly because it's a huge deal, the Supreme Leader himself, Ali Khamenei. Iran responded within hours. They called their retaliation operation True Promise 4, and their state media actually nicknamed the whole event the Ramadan War. Iran didn't just hit Israel, they fired missiles and drones at basically every country hosting American assets in the region all at once. Manama and Bahrain Kuwait International Airport, Abu Dhabi, targets in Saudi Arabia, and this is the part that matters for today's video, Erbil International Airport, and the US Consulate General, right there in Erbil, Iraq. Now, here's a term you need to lock into your brain for the rest of this video, the Kurdistan region. This is the autonomous Kurdish area in northern Iraq. It's not the same as the rest of Iraq politically. It has its own government. And critically, it's where the majority of US forces in Iraq are actually stationed right now, because troops got redeployed there from other parts of Iraq and even from northeast Syria over the past couple of years. So when I say Erbil is a target, I don't mean some random city got unlucky. I mean the place where the US concentrated its people and its hardware became almost immediately the #1 target for Iran's proxy network in Iraq. And that proxy network has a name, or actually several names, because these groups love rebranding. The main umbrella is called the Islamic Resistance in Iraq, and within days of the war starting, that group claimed responsibility for 23 separate drone strikes on US assets, specifically in Erbil. 23 in days. Another Iran-aligned militia calling itself the Iraqi Guardians of Blood Brigades claimed a separate set of attacks on the US Victory Base near Baghdad International Airport, and on positions in Erbil as well. So you had multiple armed groups, all loosely under Iran's orbit, all hitting the same handful of American footholds, basically simultaneously in the opening days of this war. Now, let's talk defenses for a second, because this is honestly the part that impresses me most as a former fighter pilot. Erbil did not just sit there and take hits helplessly. There's solid reporting. Forbes actually did a deep piece on this back in April about what they called the air defense array that shielded Iraqi Kurdistan during the war. Multiple layered systems, some US, some coalition, working together to intercept incoming drones and short-range rockets before they hit anything that mattered. You'll see footage, and some of it's out there right now circulating on social media, of a drone getting lit up mid-air over Erbil at night, this little streak of light just disintegrating in the sky, and that's air defense doing exactly what it's designed to do. I want to be honest with you though, not every intercept works, and not every launch even gets detected in time, which is exactly why the casualty numbers I'm about to give you aren't zero. According to tracking by Ruda, which is a Kurdish news outlet that's been all over this story since day one, the Kurdistan region had been hit by over 450 drones and missiles as of late March alone, just 1 month into the war, with 14 people killed at that point. Zoom out further to more recent tallying, and you get that bigger number I opened with, over 470 attacks, and 107 casualties total in the Kurdistan region since February 28th. 107. That includes civilians, by the way. This isn't purely a military body count. There's a report from the New Region, that's a regional outlet, about a family being, and this is their headline language, not mine, quote, torn apart when a drone strike killed a couple near Erbil back in early April. There's another one about 3 people killed and several injured in renewed attacks, specifically targeting an Iranian Kurdish opposition group's compound in Erbil in mid-April. This is not an abstract statistic. There are names and families behind every one of these. And it's not just Iraqi and Kurdish casualties either. Coalition partners have been hit too. French President Macron confirmed that a French soldier was killed in a drone attack in Iraq's Kurdish region back in mid-March. That's from France 24's live coverage at the time, and that tells you this isn't a purely bilateral US-Iran story playing out in Erbil. It's a multinational coalition presence that's been absorbing hits. Now let's fast forward to more recent stuff, because I know some of you clicked on this video specifically wanting to know what's happening right now, not just the history lesson. On July 1st and 2nd, just 2 weeks ago as I'm recording this, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps directly hit camps belonging to Iranian Kurdish dissident groups located near Erbil, using 2 ballistic missiles and 2 drones on one camp belonging to a group called the Kurdistan Freedom Party. And within a 48-hour window, they hit at least 2 other Iranian Kurdish dissident party camps in the same area with missiles, rockets, and drones. Now, I want to be precise here because the casualty figures are genuinely disputed, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise just to make the story cleaner. The Kurdish parties themselves say 5 militia fighters were killed along with a 17-year-old boy. The Iranian side is claiming dozens of deaths. France 24's own observer team said flatly they could not independently verify the real casualty number. So that's a case where I'm going to give you both claims and let you sit with the uncertainty, because pretending there's a clean, confirmed number when there isn't one is exactly the kind of thing that erodes trust, and I'd rather tell you we don't fully know than make something up to sound authoritative. There's a wrinkle in this that I think is genuinely fascinating from a geopolitics standpoint, and it's the kind of thing that never makes the headline but explains everything if you sit with it for a second. A New York Times report from back in May claimed that some of these Kurdish militia groups were actually expected to launch their own offensive operations, advancing into Iran itself, as part of the original joint Israeli-American war plan, but that President Trump personally changed his mind at the last minute and didn't approve that piece of the operation. The Kurdish groups, for what it's worth, deny ever receiving weapons for that purpose. Trump, on the other side, has said publicly that the U.S. did transfer weapons to Kurdish groups with the expectation they'd move them into Iran, and his exact quote was that, quote, the Kurds kept them. So you've got a direct contradiction between the US president's account and the Kurdish group's account, and there is, as of this recording, no independent record of Kamala or the Democratic Party of Iranian Kurdistan actually conducting military operations inside Iran during that window. I find that whole subplot honestly wild because it means Erbil isn't just a target getting hit by Iran, it's also potentially a staging ground that almost got activated as a launch point against Iran and then didn't. That's the kind of detail that changes how you read every single strike that's happened there since. Let's talk about who these Kurdish dissident groups even are, because I guarantee most of you have never heard these names before, and they matter for understanding why Erbil specifically keeps getting hit, even independent of the broader US-Iran fight. There are 4 main Iranian Kurdish opposition parties operating with both political and military wings. Kamala, which has been around since the 1960s, and the Democratic Party of Iranian Kurdistan, founded even earlier in the 1940s. Those are the 2 old guard groups. Then you've got 2 newer ones, the PAK, formed in 2006, and the PJAK, formed in 2004, and PJAK specifically is affiliated with the PKK, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, which is designated a terrorist organization by the US, the EU, and Israel, though I'll note the PKK itself announced its own dissolution back in May of 2025. Iran has been targeting these dissident camps inside Iraqi Kurdistan for years now. This isn't new to this war specifically. There were Iranian strikes on similar camps back in 2022 and again in 2024. What's changed is the sheer frequency and intensity since this current war kicked off. All right, let's get into the hardware side of this because I know a chunk of you are here specifically for the aviation and defense breakdown. That's kind of my whole thing. The drones Iran and its proxies have been using are largely one-way attack drones, sometimes called suicide drones or loitering munitions, meaning the drone itself is the payload. It flies to a target and detonates on impact, rather than dropping something and returning. These are cheap, they're mass-producible, and the entire strategic logic behind using dozens of them at once against a target like Erbil is to overwhelm air defense systems through sheer volume, force the defenders to expend expensive interceptor missiles against comparatively cheap drones, and hope a percentage get through purely on math. That's a tactic Iran and its proxies have leaned on across this entire war, not just at Erbil. On the defensive side, and I touched on this a minute ago, Erbil's air defense setup has been described by defense analysts as genuinely one of the more effective shields in the region during this conflict, layering different intercept systems to cover both the higher altitude ballistic missile threat and the lower, slower drone threat, which actually require pretty different detection and engagement approaches. A ballistic missile is fast and follows a predictable arc. A slow-moving drone can hug terrain and show up on radar looking almost like a bird until it's practically on top of you. So defending against both simultaneously, at scale, night after night, for months is not a trivial engineering or staffing problem. Genuinely, hats off to whoever's been running those defense cells day and night, because 107 total casualties across 470 plus attacks, while horrific and real, could have been catastrophically higher without that shield working as well as it has. Now here's my opinion section, and I want to flag clearly that everything from here forward is my read as a former fighter pilot, not a confirmed fact from a wire report. First, I think Erbil has become basically a pressure release valve for Iran throughout this entire war. Every time the US and Israel escalate against targets in Iran proper, Iran's proxy network in Iraq lights up Erbil almost like clockwork, because it's a way to retaliate against American interests without directly escalating a state-on-state exchange with the US military the same way striking a Navy ship in the Gulf would. Hitting Erbil through a militia proxy gives Iran a layer of deniability, even when everyone involved knows exactly who's arming and directing these groups. Second, I think the sheer repetition of these strikes, 470 plus, over roughly 4.5 months, tells you something about the limits of even a good air defense network. You can have a great intercept rate, genuinely great, and still bleed casualties over time purely because of how many attempts are being thrown at you. This is a war of attrition being fought against a fixed geographic point. And fixed points, no matter how well defended, are going to take some hits eventually just from statistical inevitability. Third, and this is the part that actually worries me the most looking forward, that whole subplot about Kurdish militias potentially being armed and ready to push into Iran themselves, and then that plan getting shelved at the last second by Trump, that tells me there's a live fuse sitting in that region that hasn't been lit yet, but very easily could be. If US-Iran diplomacy completely collapses, and there's separate reporting I've covered in other videos about how strained that ceasefire has gotten just this past week with strikes resuming across the Gulf, Erbil and the broader Kurdistan region is exactly the kind of place where a shelved contingency plan gets unshelved fast. I'm not saying that's happening. I want to be really clear. There's zero confirmed reporting that it is. I'm just saying the ingredients for it are sitting right there on the shelf. Fourth thing, and I promise this is my last opinion point before we wrap up. I watched the casualty dispute I mentioned earlier around that July 1st and 2nd strike on Kurdish dissident camps, the one where Kurdish sources say 5 + 1 killed and Iran claims dozens. That kind of information gap, where independent verification just isn't possible yet, is exactly the kind of thing that gets weaponized by both sides afterward to shape the narrative however benefits them. I'd bet money we get more clarity on that specific number in the coming weeks as more footage and reporting trickles out, and I'll come back and update you guys the second that happens, because I'm not interested in leaving you with a number that might be propaganda dressed up as fact. So here's where things stand as of right now, today, based on everything that's actually been confirmed by reporting. Erbil has absorbed more than 470 drone and missile attacks since this war began on February 28th. Over 100 people have been killed across the Kurdistan region as a direct result. A French soldier is among the confirmed dead. American troops, the U.S. consulate, and Erbil International Airport were direct targets in the opening days of the war, with one militia umbrella group alone claiming 23 separate drone strikes just on Erbil specifically. Iranian Kurdish dissident camps near the city have been hit as recently as 2 weeks ago by direct IRGC strikes, with casualty numbers still genuinely disputed between Kurdish and Iranian sources. And there is unresolved, contested reporting about Kurdish militias almost being activated as an offensive force against Iran itself, before that plan reportedly got pulled at the last minute. I've said this in every one of these videos, and I'll keep saying it because I think it's the single most important thing I can leave you with. There is a mountain of noise out there right now on this conflict. A lot of it designed specifically to get you angry or scared fast, so you share it without checking it. And my entire job here is to slow that down for you and hand you what's actually been confirmed versus what's still floating around unverified. I'm not always going to have a clean, satisfying, wrapped-up answer for you. And honestly, if a video ever gives you one on a story this messy, that's usually a sign something got smoothed over that shouldn't have been. If this kind of grounded breakdown is actually useful to you, genuinely, hit that like button, because it's the single biggest lever that gets this kind of careful sourced coverage in front of more people instead of the rage bait version of this same story. And second thing, I want you in the comments right now telling me which thread from today you want pulled on next. The Erbil air defense systems themselves, that wild Kurdish militia offensive plan that got shelved, or the broader ceasefire collapse between the US and Iran that's driving all of this in the first place, because your comments are legitimately what shapes what I dig into next. This is Ryan, Max Afterburner, the fighter pilot next door, and I'll catch you in the next breakdown.